time now for French Connections, our look at the intricacies of life here in France. And I'm joined for that by Solange Mougin. Welcome to the programme, Solange. This week you're focusing on French forests, and we're going to kick off in Paris.
We are. There is a push to create urban forests in the French capital and in other cities. And I admit it is a bit of a paradox to start a forest show in an urban hub, but I think it actually illustrates the gift that such trees can give and also their fragile state due to climate change. Now, in Paris, the mayor has decided to plant 170,000 trees by 2026, with autumn and winter being the ideal moment to do this. And in Paris, creating multiple urban forests, as they're called, by digging up the concrete.
La température ressentie dans cette petite forêt sera de moins 4 degrés par rapport à ce que l'on pourra avoir à l'extérieur.
Now, critics of Paris's mayor have balked at City Hall, calling this a forest, which is by nature a whole ecosystem and not just some plantings.
OK, but Solange, there is an abundance of forests here in France. 17 million hectares, to be precise.
Yeah, that is the equivalent of 31 million football fields. Forests cover some 31% of metropolitan France, of the French territory. And such expanses are actually increasing. Forests went in 1840 from 9 million to 17 million hectares in 2021, bringing France to the place of fourth place of being the most forested country in Europe. Now, national management dates back to Louis XIV. In the 1680s, France's first minister of state, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, created an ordinance to restore and control France's dwindling forests.
Bon, c'est vrai que la forêt toute seule, elle produit du bois, elle a besoin de personne, mais on peut l'aider en quelque sorte. Et le bois dont avait besoin Colbert pour la marine royale, il fallait des arbres spécialement droits, spécialement énormes, donc il fallait peut-être donner un petit coup de pouce à la forêt.
Now, today, management is overseen by l'Office National des Forêts. For private and public forests, it does what's called silviculture. Now, this is our word du jour. It is actually the same word in English, spelled slightly differently, and it comes from the Latin silvi, or forest, and it means that what it means is to control forests and to meet its needs and values.
OK, well, let's talk about some of those needs, specifically the need for wood.
Yeah, France actually imports more wood than it exports, despite having these extensive forests. In 2021, the import-export deficit was 8.6 billion euros. Now, part of this has to do with the kind of forest that France has. Another element is furniture isn't made here as much as it used to be. And on top of that, there's an increase in demand and competition from abroad.
Ce bois-là, je vais l'exporter en Chine, celui-ci. Je pourrais le vendre pour une partie sur le marché français, mais à des prix inférieurs de mon prix de revient.
Ils ont mis 120 ou 150 ans pour arriver là. Si je ne les valorise pas maintenant, je ne les valoriserai jamais.
Now, with regard to climate change, forests obviously a key part of the government's plan to combat the problem.
Yeah, Emmanuel Macron has called for 1 billion trees to be planted in the next decade. Now, that sounds great, and it is, but there are also big question marks. What trees will adapt best to a hotter planet? One type of tree or forests of many trees? Forests for industry or biodiversity? Whether to continue clear-cutting, as it is not outlawed in France. And on what land? For only a quarter of French forests are publicly owned, 16% by municipalities, and 9% are domaniales, or they belong to the state. Now, this means that 75% of French forests are in private hands and in the hands of over 3 million landowners. Now, for many of them, managing these forests, even with the help of specialists, well, it's pretty tricky.
Beaucoup de gens qui ont hérité de leur bois, qui savent pas forcément où se trouve leur bois, ce qu'il y a à faire dessus.
On hérite d'une forêt que l'on conserve, qu'on aménage pour des générations futures.
OK, Solange, let's talk for a moment about the state of French forests. How are they doing at the moment?
Well, they're not doing well at all, really. Despite planting efforts, which do not always work, with some 38% of newly planted trees not surviving, the mortality of trees, even those that are established in French forests, has increased by 80% in the past decade, be it from hotter temperatures, drought, or more attacks by insects and funguses due to climate change. Now, French forests, well, they are suffering.
La branche W3 est au stade 4. Et elle est morte. À cause du réchauffement climatique et de l'humidité qu'il y a en même temps que cette chaleur en automne et au printemps, on a de très nombreuses attaques de parasites et notamment des champignons.
Des petits trous d'entrée de scolyte et la sciure qui nous indique que l'arbre est attaqué.
C'est vrai que le hêtre, c'est une essence forestière qui a une écorce très fine, et donc il est comme nous, en fait, assujetti aux coups de soleil. Ils peuvent être très préjudiciables pour sa survie.
Now, one effect of this ill state is trees are not holding carbon as well as they used to. French forests currently capture around 7.5% of France's annual emissions. That is 2 times less than a decade ago.
S'il se met à faire de plus en plus sec, il peut y avoir une espèce de rétroaction qui fait que les arbres puissent de moins en moins capter le CO2 atmosphérique et donc amplifier le phénomène de changement climatique.
Sounds pretty worrying, Solange, but you have managed to find a positive note for us to end on.
I have. French people, well, they love their forests, be it in a classic recreational way or in alternative ones like night walks, barefoot strolls in the forest, and tree hugging.
Je me réapproprie tous les bruits de la forêt, le ruisseau, les oiseaux.
Un peu comme une paix intérieure, quoi. Ça arrête de cogiter partout.
After the countryside, forests are the French people's number 2 favorite natural place to be, with some 700,000 visits to forests a year. That is the equivalent of 22 people every single second in France enjoying a forest and feeling how it is good for all of us.
All right, well, thank you very much indeed for that, Solange. For more episodes of French Connections, do check out our website, france24.com, and don't hesitate to reach out on social media if you've got any questions about life here in Paris.